This will sound very strange, but the Lord God, the righteous Christian God of the Bible, is using as a metaphor to point to the coming predicted solar flare, solar storm that will knock out the North American power grid on August 13th, 2024. God is using this metaphor of a lion's roar to symbolize this. And because of this metaphor, God is using James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King. This is why the predicted death of James Earl Jones will point to the coming solar storm, lion's roar, from the surface of the sun. This video will explain a small portion of these signs that involve James Earl Jones, and it'll explain the prophetic signs that occurred on February 17th, and connections from other signs that connected to February 17th. I will explain how February 17th, which was a date that God was overwhelmingly pointing to ahead of time, was an important step in the trail of signs leading to the predicted death of James Earl Jones on May 17th, 2024, 88 days before the predicted solar storm that will knock out the power grid. And James Earl Jones reprised his role as the Lion King in the new live-action The Lion King movie in 2019 at the age of 88. And as will be explained in these videos, this is one reason, among other reasons, why this 88 days connection from his death to the predicted lion's roar on the surface of the sun is relevant. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, to explain what is going on here, we have this diagram that was made prior to February 17th. This video was made prior to March 25th. In this video, I explain at the beginning of it how the signs on this date revealed adding the 37 days to get March 25th. And this is how God's big picture of signs works. This is how it works, and the prediction will prove this. The skeptic will say you're just continuing to make up dates, whatever, but when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove all of the analysis is 100% correct. February 17th was a step in a trail of signs that led to March 25th, which is leading to April 11th. And by the way, the prophetic signs that occurred that were relevant on March 25th that revealed adding 17 days to get April 11th for the date it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die, and the historic barge on the Niagara River will crash over Niagara Falls 17 days later on March 11th. These signs that occurred on March 25th, April 11th, 17 days after March 25th, the signs that occurred on March 25th are explained in the amazing, profound, and must-watch Apocalypse Now video to learn about the story and the knowledge God was revealing through all of this on March 25th and the signs that connected to March 25th, etc. All right, so later in this video, you'll hear talk about March 25th, and that's important because this is how God's signs works. And if you want to know about God's signs, then you need to know about how it is a big picture of signs, which is only being explained on this channel. It's up to you whether you want to know about God's signs or not. But I guarantee you that you will miss out, because the purpose of all of this is that through these connections, God is telling stories and revealing very important knowledge. The full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs, all of them, cannot be properly understood without their connections and context with the other signs. It is a big picture of signs that produces the information that God is communicating. Okay, so it shouldn't be confusing. Simply, this diagram was made before February 17th. This video was made before March 25th. Both of these dates are dates that God was pointing to. And the signs that occurred on the dates confirmed all of the analysis. All right? Now, as I'm about to explain, God is demonstrating a 7 days warning because the barge on the Niagara River is symbolic of Noah's flood, and God gave Noah a 7 days warning before the flood judgment, and the coming judgment that is being alluded to with the death of James Earl Jones and the crash of the barge 7 days beforehand is the predicted solar flare. This April 1st date was also a step in the trail of signs leading to the predicted solar flare. The sign that we received on this day, for example, was the 7, as in the 7 days warning, deaths in the World Central Kitchen convoy aid in Gaza. That is because the coming solar flare is predicted to cause food shortages and food rationing, hence the 7 deaths in the World Central Kitchen that were accidentally attacked by the Israeli Defense Force on this date that was expected or known in advance. This is a relevant sign. Anyway, that's also explained in the Apocalypse Now video. There's much more to that. You need to watch the Apocalypse Now video, which, by the way, the title is inferring the movie Apocalypse Now because God has used the movie Apocalypse Now in his storytelling here. All right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, the rest of this video is about so much more than just this at the end of this diagram. This is extremely important, the rest of this video. This is an amazing video. Make sure you watch all of this video. All right, what you just heard was recorded prior to April 11th. April 11th was also a major step in the trail of signs. I can't emphasize that enough. The analysis was 100% correct. God was overwhelmingly pointing to April 11th in regards to James Earl Jones and his death, which again is symbolism for the coming lion's roar on the surface of the sun. The amazing must-watch, learn about, that is an understatement, signs that occurred on April 11th will be explained in the O.J. Simpson video. One of the signs, although this doesn't communicate any knowledge to you, you should not decide whether or not to watch the video based on this. But one of the signs was the news of the death of O.J. Simpson. You'll see in the video how that is extremely important and how it ties into so many other things. I can't even describe it enough, okay? So, also, more insight has come to light. In fact, it was originally thought that the 7 days warning from the barge would be a 7 days warning before the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, and it turns out that that is in fact correct. The barge is not part of this video really, but I did mention it, and that will be on May 12th, 7 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. On May 19th, the barge will crash from a high place over the Niagara Falls, and likewise, Kamala Harris will fall from a high place in a plane crash in St. Louis on May 19th. The barge is also pointing to the solar flare, but in another way, which will be explained in other videos. That said, as I have said, God's big picture of signs is producing knowledge, and this is why the wise person will know after the prediction comes to pass that James Earl Jones will die on May 17th, that all of the videos must be watched, every minute of them. Also, this date right here, the Field of Dreams game, which was played in the same cornfield that the movie was filmed in, a movie about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox, is 1,009 days before it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die. 1,009 days hints at the number 19. And this movie is about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox. Furthermore, as we can see in this diagram, God has played on this allusion to the number 19 with this 919 days here, but also the Field of Dreams game was exactly 190 months, and 190 hints at 19, and 190 is the 19th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 19th row is 190. The Field of Dreams game about the 1919 Black Sox was exactly 190 months after Barack Obama threw out the first pitch, which was exactly or is exactly 19 years before the Second Coming and his defeat on the Temple Mount. Because God uses pitchers on the pitching mound as symbolism for the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy. And we have another play on the number 19 here too, because the first commissioner of baseball, who was given unchecked power over every person in baseball after the 1919 Chicago Black Sox World Series cheating scandal, his rise to power is or was exactly 1,091 months, which is another hint at 19, and the 1919 Black Sox before Obama's first pitch, which is 19 years before the Second Coming and his defeat on the Temple Mount. And so you get the idea here. That's why James Earl Jones will die 1,009 days exactly after the Field of Dreams game. All right, I'm now recording this after February 17th, and it is my great pleasure to update you on what has transpired here. But I just want to add a couple of things before I explain the prophetic signs that occurred on February 17th. And one thing is that the date February 17th is why we had predicted that the barge would crash over on this date. This wasn't the only instance in which God was pointing to the date February 17th regarding the barge. We had this in 2020 as well, and in 2023. So, and I believe also 2022. If I recall. Anyway, the reason for that is that the flood began in the book of Genesis on the 17th day of the second month. And Niagara Falls symbolizes the flood. It symbolizes the power of water moving over the earth. It engenders a perennial rainbow, the rainbow being God's sign, his covenant regarding judgment in the account of the flood. And the barge that is stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River was involved at the time of it being stuck, getting stuck. It was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, in which a lifeline was shot from the power plant to rescue the two men stuck on the barge. This is all symbolism for Noah's Ark and the rescue of Noah and his family in the ark, a type of barge, if you will. Okay, so that's that. Now, in the account of the flood, God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark before the flood would begin. This is why it is now predicted that James Earl Jones and the barge will crash over the falls. James Earl Jones will die and the barge will crash over the falls 7 days, as in a 7 days warning, before the predicted solar flare that will knock out the nation's power grid. There's, of course, lots more reasoning to this than simply the 7 days warning. And one thing is that the date, March 25th, will be 37 days after this date. That hints at 3 sets of 7. That is a hint at the book of Joshua and the symbolic 3 sets of 7 that the Israelites enacted before the walls of security collapsed on the city of Jericho in God's judgment. All right, so they marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was a 3 sets of 7. There are also 3 sets of 3 sets of 7 in the account of the flood. In that 3 sets of 3 sets of 7 in the flood account is the 7 days warning that I just mentioned. Okay, so that's why 7 days, March 25th, before April 1st. But also, the 37 days is 888 hours. Sorry. Yes, 888 hours. And that is profound too, because that hints at Jesus, because the name Jesus in Greek gematria, equals 888. Gematria, if you don't know, Roman, Greek, and Hebrew letters are also numbers, and as such, names and words can be converted into a numeric value, and God frequently uses this 888 symbolism in his prophetic signs to point to Jesus. And the rapture is symbolic of Jesus, the rescue in the account of the flood is symbolic of Jesus rescuing his faithful at the time of the coming judgment, which, as Peter said, this time will be symbolized by fire instead of water, which is why the solar flare, which is symbolic of fire. All right, so that's also a confirmation. So again, the way God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, is it works on the principle of second and third witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, but it is also an interconnected web. The full intended meaning of the prophetic signs cannot be properly understood without their connections and context with the other signs. Because through them, God is telling stories, through the connections, through the signs connecting to each other. Like, this diagram is a perfect example, with the first commissioner of baseball hinting at the Antichrist, and the Antichrist using rationed food, restricting buying and selling food, which is hinted at with the restriction on buying and selling alcohol. This is a great example, okay? And it's even identifying who that Antichrist is, Obama, because he threw out the first pitch. Okay, so you get the idea. And anyway, the point is that February 17th was a step in the trail of signs. All of the analysis for February 17th was 100% correct. If you are skeptical, when the prediction comes to pass, 37 days later, it will prove that. And that, is the purpose of the prediction, is to prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, and therefore, the important knowledge and stories that God is communicating through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is true. This is the purpose of the prediction that is from God. This prediction that James Earl Jones will die on March 25th is a prediction from God. And this is the purpose of the prediction, is to prove these things that I'm saying. All right, now I'm going to explain the amazing signs that occurred on February 17th. All right, this is an explanation for the amazing prophetic signs from the righteous Christian God of the Bible that occurred on February 17th, these signs that were expected in advance of February 17th, because it was known that God was pointing to February 17th, and this was known in advance of February 17th. And these signs related to, as was known ahead of time, James Earl Jones and the predicted death of James Earl Jones, and the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River, and its predicted crash finally after 100 years over Niagara Falls. All right, now this email was composed on February 18th, as we can see, and this was my analysis that I wrote regarding what had happened. I wrote to some friends here. All right, so it was expected that on February 17th, James Earl Jones would die and the barge would crash over Niagara Falls. The voice of the Lion King is symbolism for a solar flare, a lion's roar. God is using this metaphor of a lion's roar for the coming solar flare on the surface of the sun. That's explained in other videos. But that's why James Earl Jones, because he was the voice of the Lion King. On February 17th, a rare solar flare erupted. Okay, so we already knew, in fact, a couple of years ago, that James Earl Jones was symbolism for a lion's roar. That actually has been known since 2020, at least early 2020. All right, because it's been known since 2019, the summer of 2019, that God is using James Earl Jones, and then I forget how long it took to figure out that he was. This was hinting at this coming solar flare, lion's roar on the surface of the sun. But anyway. the point is that we already knew this a long time ago, and we knew about February 17th ahead of time. That's why it's astounding beyond words that on this date we received a solar flare sign. It's just amazing. On February 17th, a rare solar flare erupted, and that's what makes it a sign, because it's rare. I'll explain, but this is news. It was a news story, in other words. Okay, a rare solar flare erupted 200,000 kilometers high above the sun. Now, what made it exceptional? Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Do I write it? Where do I write it? Well, I'll probably explain it later on in the email, but I'll just explain it now. What made it rare is that it occurred on the South Pole. Solar flares do not typically erupt on the South Pole. They erupt at the equator of the sun. And not only did it erupt on the South Pole, but it was exceptionally high, like extremely high. So this is unheard of. It was a news story because of this. It was 200,000 kilometers above the sun, and it was at the South Pole. So let's move on. This solar flare sign was exactly 188 weeks. This is a number God frequently uses in his signs, but it is important. It is a huge thing when he does use it, because it hints at the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe, ! Used in the context of extreme judgment from God. That is appropriate, this connection of exactly 188 weeks to this solar flare, because the solar flare is a sign that's pointing to the upcoming woe, which is the predicted eruption of the sun that will knock out the power grid on April 1st, 2024. Okay, so this solar flare sign, though, on February 17th, was exactly 188 weeks after this amazing prophetic sign, which was the first, and God uses firsts for his signs, the first ever detected super flare. This was a new term invented because of this discovery. The first ever detected super flare on a star located right in the neck of the constellation Leo, the lion, which, because of this, the media dubbed this news story the Lion's Roar. The super flare was 20 times more powerful than any solar flare ever detected on our sun. That's why it was a super flare. And the 20 times also hints at the 200,000 kilometers for this rare super flare on February 17th, exactly 188 weeks later. Now, the date isn't the actual date of the super flare. This was the date that it was first reported. The published study from the university that discovered this. All right, but that was the day that the media called it the Lion's Roar. That was the headline. All right. So this is amazing. I mean, this is one of the main signs, actually, regarding the coming, eruption of the solar flare on the sun. And so it profoundly connects to this date that we knew in advance was a Lion King, Lion's Roar date. Okay, so it doesn't get any more amazing. All right, now, this February 17th date was also 4 + 4 days after the Noah flare. So there was a flare that was a news story as well. It was an X-class flare. But what made it a prophetic sign, this particular one, was that it emanated from sunspot 7595, if I recall. Now, I can't remember everything. But whatever the number was, and I think that is the number, but it, in Strong's Concordance, the 7,595th word, or whatever number it was, is the word Noah. Okay? And again, February 17th no, maybe explained it earlier in another video maybe, but the date February 17th is Noah symbolism, because the flood in the account in Genesis began on the 17th day of the second month. That's why we have this amazing 4 + 4 days connection between these two solar flares, the Noah flare and this solar flare on February 17th. But why is 4 + 4 days relevant and important or significant? Because the 44th president is the Antichrist. But what confirms this, and this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And so we need a second witness to confirm this 4 + 4 days connection. It's not enough to just have the 4 + 4 days and go, oh, cool, 44th president. No, it's not enough. We need a second witness. But God does this when it is his signs. And the solar flare on February 17th is 44 days before the predicted solar flare. This date, 4/1, April 1st. And this date was known before this 44 days connection was known. All right. So that's amazing. We have 4 + 4 days and then 44 days connecting all three of these solar flares. One of them is a predicted one in the future. Astounding. Now, regarding Noah symbolism, 7 days before this is March 25th, and that is the date that it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die and the barge will crash over Niagara Falls on the same day that Jones is predicted to die. The reason for the 7 days is because in the account of the flood, God gave Noah a 7 days warning before the flood waters came. And the barge is Noah's flood symbolism, because Niagara Falls is symbolic of the power of water moving over the earth, and it engenders a perennial rainbow, and which is God's sign regarding his covenant with man concerning judgment. And the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls at the time that it got stuck. And that's symbolic of the rescue of Noah and his family in the ark. Okay, so that's why the barge will crash on March 25th, predicted. This is the prediction, because it'll be 7 days before the predicted solar flare that will knock out the power. Furthermore, Niagara Falls is associated with electricity, the hydroelectric power plant there. And furthermore, that's how the men were rescued. The Coast Guard shot a lifeline from the top of the power plant in order to pull in the men trapped on the barge. Okay. And by the way, March 25th is 37 days after February 17th. That hints at 3 sets of 7. In the account of Noah's flood, there are 3 instances of 3 sets of 7. God uses 3 sets of 7 in context of his judgment. This comes also from the book of Joshua, when the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment. They marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. Okay, and so the reason why James Earl Jones will die 7 days ahead of time as well is that'll be part of this sign in conjunction with the barge crashing that will indicate a 7 days warning before the lion's roar on the surface of the sun. The solar flare on February 17th was exceptional for its height. The solar flare on February 17th was exactly 1,117 months after James Earl Jones was born. That is amazing, so amazing beyond words, because again, this was known ahead of time. February 17th was known ahead of time to be exactly 1,117 months after the birth of James Earl Jones. But, and also the sun being alluded to with this connection because it's high above the earth, symbolically. So Bama in Hebrew means high place. That's why God uses this number to point to the Antichrist, to identify him. All right? Okay, and that's because the name Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Heaven is a high place is a metaphor in the Bible for heaven. Lucifer, it is said, fell from the high place. And Jesus said in Luke 10:18 that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Barack means lightning, Bama means high place or heaven, and O in the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, means from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. And this is why God uses 1,117 in his signs for this purpose, because either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. All right, so there you have the full explanation for why this is so amazing, because the solar flare that occurred on February 17th, as I just mentioned, was known, it was a story because of its height. And that's why we have this 1,117 months exact connection to February 17th. All right, the rare solar flare on the south pole of the sun on February 17th was 220.55% of a year after the solar flare over the south, after the solar eclipse, I should say, over the south pole that pointed to Shackleton's Endurance ship. And the date of the eclipse was December 4th, 2021. So there are actually, I can't recall for you the details of the other eclipse over Antarctica that also points to Shackleton's Endurance ship. But the Endurance ship is a coincidence because Shackleton and his crew ended up going on the most epic test of endurance in all of history. And it just so happens that their ship was named Endurance, and this is because it hints at the endurance of the saints. Now, the reason why 220.55% is relevant is because 220 symbolizes Jesus, because the 220th word, well, first of all, 220 is 2 times 110. This is why on 9/11 it was 2 times 110 stories that collapsed, because Jesus in his first coming officially arrived on the date 110, which hints at 110. Therefore, the second coming is symbolized by 2 times 110. That's why on 9/11 the 2 towers that were 110 stories. But also, the 220th word in Strong's Greek Concordance is the word for rooster, which symbolizes Peter in Christianity. And Peter's name means rock. It is the Greek word for rock, and in the Bible, rock symbolizes Jesus. And Jesus is symbolized by this lion's roar that's coming on the surface of the sun. Now, 55, because this also hints at James Earl Jones, who was born near Memphis, and lots of other signs, Graceland, etc., and the I-55 highway. Let's just, okay, so let's leave it there. Explained in other videos. Okay, so now the eclipse in turn was exactly 9 weeks before the Endurance ship, the Endurance 22 was launched, and exactly 13 weeks before Endurance 22 discovered the Endurance ship. That's a great story, but not for this video. 9 times 13 equals 117, the date of the resurrection of Christ. Okay, so I'm just going on the details here, but you get the idea. So the South Pole solar flare was discovered by an Argentine astronomer. Okay, this one on February 17th I'm talking about. Okay, it was discovered by this Argentine astronomer. I think he was an amateur astronomer. I'm not sure about that, though. Probably not, because it's the sun, right? I don't know, though. But the point is that the Antichrist, the first of the two Antichrists, Pope Francis, is from Argentina. The solar flare was 3 days after the Kansas City shooting, after the Super Bowl, the victory parade, which was 3 days after the Super Bowl, which pointed to Francis. Okay, the Super Bowl was all about the number 13, as explained in the Swift Super Bowl video. All right, and it was all about Francis. That's why San Francisco was in the Super Bowl. And these 3 days connecting with 313, with the number 13, that's the day that Pope Francis was elected. All right, and the Super Bowl was about how Kansas City won by 3 points, 3 seconds remaining in the game. The quarterback passed for 333 yards, etc. In the overtime, the third period, all right, etc. So I don't know. The article needs to be read to appreciate the solar flare and how it was rare. So I'm writing to my friends there, but I think you got the idea. It was rare because it was from the South Pole, and it was 200,000 kilometers above the sun. Anyway, there you have it. There you have also the explanation for how February 17th was an important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that James Earl Jones will die and the historic barge will crash over Niagara Falls on March 25th, which will be a prophetic 7 days warning before the predicted solar flare on the sun, a lion's roar, that will knock out the North American power grid. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.